The glass of red wine hit my chest before I even saw it coming. It splashed across my white blouse like a wound, soaking through to my skin. The restaurant went quiet. Every fork stopped. Every conversation died. And the woman standing over me, my son's wife, looked down at me with a smile that could freeze fire. "Next time," she said, loud enough for every table to hear, "don't show up where you're not wanted, you pathetic old woman." I sat there, dripping, shaking, too stunned to speak. She didn't recognize me. She had never seen my face before tonight. She had no idea that the woman she just humiliated in front of 50 people was the mother of the man she married 3 years ago. And when my son walked through that door 10 minutes later, everything she had built, every lie, every scheme, every stolen dollar, was about to collapse. My name is Dorothy Ashford. I am 64 years old. I live alone in a small blue house in Decatur, Georgia, where I grow tomatoes in the summer and read mystery novels in the winter. I raised my son James by myself after his father walked out when James was 7. I worked the front desk at a veterinary clinic for 26 years. I am not rich. I am not powerful. I am just a mother who loves her son more than anything in this world. And until tonight, I had not seen him in over 3 years. Let me explain how we got here, because none of this happened overnight. It started slowly, the way most heartbreaks do. When James was 28, he called me on a Tuesday evening. I remember because I was making cornbread, and my hands were covered in flour when I picked up the phone. "Mom," he said, and his voice had that breathless quality it gets when he's excited. I met someone. Her name was Victoria. She was a marketing director at a firm downtown, 5 years older than James, confident, sharp, beautiful. He described her like she was made of light. I was happy for him. I truly was. But something about the way he talked about her made me uneasy. He didn't say she was kind. He didn't say she made him laugh. He said she was impressive. He said people noticed her when she walked into a room. He said she knew how to get what she wanted. I asked to meet her. He said soon. I asked again a month later. He said she was traveling for work. I asked a third time, and he paused. "Mum, Victoria is really busy. She's not the Sunday dinner type." That stung, but I let it go. Mothers learn to let things go. 6 months later, James told me they were getting married. I congratulated him, asked about the wedding, offered to help. He said Victoria had it handled. Everything was taken care of. "Just show up and be happy, Mom," he said. So I did. I showed up to a beautiful ceremony at a country club I could never afford. I wore a lavender dress I had saved up for. I sat in the 3rd row because someone told me the front rows were reserved. I watched my only son marry a woman I had spoken to exactly once, on the phone, for 4 minutes. She had said, "Nice to meet you, Dorothy. James talks about you." Then she handed the phone back to him. After the wedding, I expected things to open up. I expected holiday dinners, weekend visits, maybe even a phone call asking for my cornbread recipe. Instead, the opposite happened. James called less, then almost never. When I called him, he answered in short sentences. "Busy, Mom, work's crazy. Victoria says hi." She never said hi. I could tell. One Thanksgiving, I drove 2 hours to their house uninvited because James hadn't returned my calls in 3 weeks. I knocked on the door with a pecan pie in my hands. Victoria opened it. She looked at me like I was selling magazines. "Oh," she said. "James didn't mention you were coming." She let me in, but the house felt cold. James hugged me, but his eyes darted toward Victoria the whole time, checking her reaction. We ate dinner mostly in silence. When I tried to tell a story about James as a boy, Victoria interrupted. "That's cute. James, did you send that email to Marcus?" After dinner, James walked me to my car. "Mum," he said quietly, "maybe call before you come next time." My heart cracked, but I held it together until I was on the highway. Then I pulled over and cried for 20 minutes. Over the next 2 years, the distance grew into a canyon. James missed my birthday. He missed Christmas. He stopped answering my calls altogether. I sent letters. I sent cards. I sent his favorite peanut brittle in a tin. Nothing came back. I called his office once, and his assistant told me James had requested that personal calls be screened. That was the day I realized something was very wrong. I tried reaching out to James's best friend, Marcus, the one he had known since middle school. Marcus hesitated, then told me something that made my blood run cold. "Mrs. Ashford," he said, "James told everyone you didn't want to be part of his life anymore. He said you disapproved of Victoria and that you told him to choose." I had never said that. I had never even thought it. Someone had been telling lies, and I knew exactly who. But what could I do? I had no proof. I had no access. I was just an old woman in Decatur, with a broken heart and a garden full of tomatoes nobody was coming to eat. Then, 3 months ago, something changed. I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a woman named Shelby. She said she was Victoria's younger sister, and she needed to tell me something. "Mrs. Ashford," she said, her voice shaking. "I know what my sister has been doing, and it's not right." What Shelby told me over the next hour rewrote everything I thought I knew. Victoria had been intercepting my letters. She had blocked my number on James's phone. She had told James that I sent a letter saying I wanted nothing to do with them because Victoria wasn't good enough for my son. She showed James a letter I never wrote. She forged it. My own handwriting, copied from a birthday card I once sent James. Shelby had found the original card and the practice sheets Victoria used to mimic my writing. She kept them hidden in a box in their guest room closet. But that wasn't the worst of it. Shelby also told me that Victoria had been slowly draining a savings account James had set up in my name years ago, a fund he created when he got his first real job, meant for my retirement. He put money in every month. He thought I was receiving it. I never knew the account existed. Victoria had rerouted the statements, changed the mailing address, and had been withdrawing from it for over 2 years. $23,000. Gone. I sat on my kitchen floor and cried, not because of the money, because my son thought I had abandoned him, because for 3 years he believed his mother didn't love him anymore, and the woman who did this was sleeping beside him every night. Shelby told me one more thing. James's birthday was coming up, and Victoria was throwing a dinner at an upscale Italian restaurant in Buckhead. James would be there, along with Victoria's parents, her friends, and her colleagues. "She'll never expect you," Shelby said. "She's never even shown James a photo of you to her friends. To them, you don't exist." So I made a plan. Not for revenge, not for drama, for truth. I just needed my son to see me and to hear the truth from my own mouth. The night of the dinner, I put on a simple white blouse and black slacks. I didn't wear anything fancy. I didn't need to impress anyone. Shelby had reserved a small table near the back of the restaurant under a different name. I arrived early, sat down, and ordered a glass of water. The restaurant was beautiful. Dim lighting, white tablecloths, the kind of place where people whisper. I watched the door. At 7:15, they arrived. Victoria walked in first, of course. She wore a red dress and heels that clicked on the tile floor like a countdown. Behind her came a group of people laughing and talking. Then her parents, a well-dressed couple who looked like they had never been told no in their lives. And then, behind everyone else, came James. My heart stopped. He looked older. His shoulders were broader, but they hunched slightly forward, the way they do when he's carrying something heavy. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I would know those eyes anywhere. I gave him those eyes. I almost stood up right then. I almost called his name. But I waited. I watched them sit at a long table in the center of the room. Victoria ordered champagne. She raised a glass and made a toast. "To my incredible husband," she said. "The man who chose the right future." The table clapped. James smiled thinly. I watched for nearly an hour. I watched Victoria command the table, interrupt James twice, snap at a waiter for bringing the wrong bread, and send a dish back because it was too salty. Her parents laughed at everything, she said. James sat quietly, picking at his food. Then I stood up. I smoothed my blouse. I took a breath, and I walked toward the table. I didn't get far. Victoria saw me approaching before I reached the table. She must have thought I was a confused customer, or maybe a waiter. She was in the middle of telling a story when she noticed me standing nearby. She turned her head sharply. "Can I help you?" she said, her voice already annoyed. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "I just wanted to say hello." She looked me up and down. "Do I know you?" "No," I said. "You don't." And that was the truth. She had never met me face to face. Not once. She stood up, irritated. And that's when I accidentally stepped too close to the table, brushing against her chair. She grabbed the glass of wine from the table and threw it at me. Not a splash, a throw. The red wine hit my chest and dripped down my blouse. "Are you insane?" she hissed. "This is a private dinner. Get out of here before I call the manager." The entire restaurant froze. I stood there, soaked, humiliated, unable to move. Victoria's mother laughed nervously and said, "Some people have no boundaries." Her father shook his head and muttered, "Unbelievable." James was looking at his phone. He hadn't seen it happen. Not yet. Victoria sat back down, smoothed her hair, and said, "Where was I?" Like nothing happened. I didn't leave. I stood there, wine dripping from my blouse, my hands shaking, my chin raised. A waiter came over and quietly asked if I was okay. "I'm fine," I whispered, "but I need to stay." If you're listening to this right now, and your heart is pounding, take a moment to tap like, drop a comment telling me what you would have done in my place, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Because the next few minutes changed everything. I stood near the wall, close enough to see the table but far enough not to be noticed again. I waited. Then Shelby walked in. She was supposed to arrive late, and she did. Right on time. She greeted Victoria, hugged James, and sat down. Then she looked across the room at me, and gave the smallest nod. Shelby leaned toward James and said something I couldn't hear. James frowned. He looked up from his phone. He looked toward the entrance of the restaurant, then turned his head slowly to where I was standing. Our eyes met. For a moment, nothing happened. Then his face changed. His lips parted, his brow furrowed. He squinted, like he was seeing something impossible. And then he stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor. "Mom?" he said. The word was barely a whisper, but I heard it across the room like thunder. Victoria's head snapped toward him. "What did you say?" James didn't answer her. He walked toward me, his steps getting faster. When he reached me, he stopped. He looked at my soaked blouse. He looked at the wine stain spreading across my chest. He looked at my face. "Mom," he said again, and this time his voice broke. "What happened?" I couldn't speak. 3 years of silence pressed against my throat like a fist. Victoria appeared beside him, her face tight. "James, who is this?" "This is my mother," he said, and the words hit the room like a clap of thunder. Every person at that table turned. Victoria's mother dropped her napkin. Her father went still. Victoria's face drained of color. "That's impossible," she said. "Your mother lives in South Carolina. You said she didn't want to be part of your life." "I live in Decatur," I said quietly. 20 minutes from your house." James turned to Victoria. "What is she talking about?" Victoria forced a laugh. "James, this isn't the time." "Why is my mother covered in wine?" he asked. Victoria's jaw tightened. "She bumped into me. It was an accident. I watched you throw that glass at her," Shelby said from the table. Every eye turned to Shelby. Victoria's face went white. "Shelby, what are you doing?" "Telling the truth," Shelby said. "Something you've never done." James looked at me. "Mum, what's going on?" And so I told him. Everything. The blocked phone number. The intercepted letters. The forged letter Victoria showed him, the one that said I wanted nothing to do with them. I watched my son's face collapse like a building losing its foundation. "You wrote that letter," he said, turning to Victoria. "You told me she didn't love me anymore." Victoria's voice rose. "I was protecting you. She was going to hold you back." "Hold me back?" James said. "She raised me alone. She worked 2 jobs so I could go to college. She's the reason I'm standing here." "Exactly," Victoria snapped. "Standing here, not back there in that little house with those little tomatoes and that little life." Silence. The kind that burns. James stared at her like she had just spoken a language he didn't understand. Then he turned to me. "What else?" he asked quietly. I told him about the savings account. His face went from pale to grey. "What savings account?" he whispered. "The one you set up for me," I said. "I never knew about it until 3 months ago." He looked at Victoria. "I've been putting money in that account for 6 years." Victoria crossed her arms. "I invested it." "In what?" he asked. She didn't answer. Shelby did. "Shopping. A lease on a new car. A membership to a country club." "I found the receipts, James. $23,000. Victoria turned on her sister. You went through my things? You went through his mother's life, Shelby shot back. Victoria's father stood up from the table. Victoria, is this true? She hesitated for just a second too long. Her mother looked away. James's hands were shaking. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He scrolled for a moment, then stopped. My call log, he said. You deleted her calls. Victoria said nothing. My contacts, he continued. You changed her name to a spam number. Still nothing. And that letter, he said, his voice cracking. You sat next to me while I cried over that letter. You held me while I believed my mother had given up on me. And the whole time, you wrote it. Victoria finally spoke. You were better off without her, the room gasped. James stepped back like he had been hit. Better off? He repeated. I spent 3 years thinking my mother didn't love me. She would have made you soft, Victoria said, and there was no remorse in her voice. She would have kept you small. James looked at her for a long, heavy moment. Then he said, You're the one who made me small. You made me believe the only person who ever truly loved me had thrown me away. Victoria's eyes flickered with something, maybe fear, maybe regret, but it disappeared fast. If you walk away from me, she said, her voice low and dangerous, I'll tell everyone about the promotion. I'll tell them you didn't earn it. I'll make sure you never work in this city again. James was quiet. Then he laughed. Not a happy laugh, the kind that comes when you've been carrying something impossibly heavy and you finally set it down. Tell them, he said. Tell every single person. Because I would rather start over from nothing than spend one more day living inside your lies. If this story has you holding your breath, hit like right now. Tell me in the comments whether you think James should press charges. And subscribe, because what happened next shocked everyone in that restaurant, including me. Victoria looked around the room, searching for an ally. Her father sat down slowly. Her mother stared at the tablecloth. Her friends avoided her eyes. For the first time, nobody was on her side. Shelby, Victoria said, her voice trembling now. How could you do this to me? I'm your sister. Shelby stood up from the table and walked to where I was standing. She took a napkin and gently dabbed the wine from my blouse. I did this because of you, she said to Victoria. Because I watched you destroy a family and smile while you did it. Because Mum and Dad let you get away with everything your whole life, and I was tired of pretending that was okay. Victoria's mother finally spoke. Shelby, that's enough. No, Shelby said. It's not. Did you know she forged a letter to cut James off from his mother? Did you know she stole $23,000 from an old woman's retirement fund? Her mother went pale. Her father looked at Victoria. Is that true? He asked. Victoria's chin trembled. I was managing things. You were stealing, James said. He turned to me. Mum, I'm filing a police report tonight. Victoria laughed, but it sounded like a gasp. You wouldn't. I already have the bank records, Shelby said quietly. I pulled them last week. Victoria stared at her sister with pure hatred. You planned this. No, Shelby said. You planned your version of the future. I just told the truth. James reached out and took my hand. His grip was warm, steady, the same grip he had as a little boy when we crossed the street together. Mum, he said, I'm so sorry. I should have questioned it. I should have found you. My eyes burned with tears. You're here now, I said. That's all that matters. He squeezed my hand. Then he looked at Victoria one last time. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the divorce and the money. Don't call me. Victoria's face twisted. You're making a mistake, James. No, he said. I made the mistake 3 years ago when I believed you over my own mother. He turned to the table. His voice was calm but thick with emotion. I'm sorry this happened here tonight, he said to the guests. But I need to be honest with all of you. For 3 years, I was told my mother didn't want me. Tonight I found out that was a lie. I found out money was stolen from her. I found out letters were forged. I found out I was being controlled. And I didn't see it because I wanted to believe the best in someone. He paused. I won't make that mistake again. Nobody spoke. Victoria stood alone, her red dress bright against the dim restaurant, her hands at her sides. She looked smaller somehow, like the room itself had decided she didn't belong. James walked me out of the restaurant. The cool Georgia night air hit my face, and I breathed deeply for what felt like the first time in years. He helped me into his car. "I'm taking you home, Mum," he said. "Then I'm coming back for my things." We drove in silence for a while. Then, at a red light, he said, "I missed your cornbread." I laughed through my tears. "I'll make you some tomorrow." He smiled, and this time, it reached his eyes. In the weeks that followed, James filed for divorce. He filed a police report for the stolen money. Victoria's attorney tried to settle quietly, but the bank records were clear. She had withdrawn $23,000 from an account in my name without my knowledge or consent. The charges were brought. Victoria's parents hired expensive lawyers, but the evidence was overwhelming. She was ordered to repay the full amount and was given 2 years of probation for financial fraud and identity theft. James moved into a small apartment not far from my house. He came over for dinner every Sunday. He fixed my screen door. He helped me plant new tomatoes. One evening, while we sat on the porch drinking sweet tea, he said, "I should have known. You would never write a letter like that. You trusted someone you loved," I said. "There's no shame in that." He looked at me. "How did you do it?" he asked. "How did you survive 3 years thinking I didn't want you?" I thought about it for a moment. "I didn't survive," I said. "I just kept waking up every morning and hoping today would be different. And eventually, it was." He put his arm around me, and we sat there as the sun went down, listening to the crickets start their evening chorus. Here is what I learned. Silence is not peace. Silence is permission. When someone tells you to be quiet, they are not protecting the family. They are protecting themselves. And the truth, no matter how painful, no matter how late it arrives, is always worth telling. Victoria lost more than a marriage. She lost the control she had spent years building. She lost her sister's loyalty. She lost the respect of everyone who watched her throw wine at a 64-year-old woman who just wanted to see her son. And me? I got back the only thing that ever mattered. My boy. If this story moved you, if it made you angry, or if it reminded you of someone you need to call tonight, take a moment to like this video. Leave a comment telling me what part hit you the hardest, and subscribe to Amber's revenge story so you don't miss the next one, because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't yelling or fighting back. Sometimes it's just standing still in a wine-stained blouse, looking your son in the eyes, and letting the truth do what it was always meant to do.